Rock City is acquiring 60% stake in these 4 hotels for some $61 million and is expected to invest some $96 million in it. Well, you've asked a lot of questions. You've talked about the deal. You've even asked questions about SSNIT itself and how it conducts its business. This morning, we're joined by a man who knows pensions, he knows insurance, he knows investment. Dr. Daniel Seddoh is a former CEO of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. He joins us via Zoom. Dr. Seddoh, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Winston. Good morning to our listeners and viewers.
Great. So I know you've been following, all these conversations about the sale of 60% of SSNIT shares in these hotels. What really are the issues for you?
Well, we need to put all of the discussion in context, and let's remind ourselves that SSNIT is a social scheme which is not fully funded. So you get more than what you put in, and because it's a social scheme, it must be managed for the benefit of what I would describe as the least of my brothers. So if you don't take the social aspect into consideration and you do things anyhow, what you will see is that at the end of the day, you'll be struggling to meet your commitment. And it should not be lost on us so soon that we recently discussed the ILO actuarial report on SSNIT. So now you are seeing the issues that contributed to the kind of report we got from the actuarial evaluation. And I thought this is a time we should be working hard to correct the situation rather than aggravating it. Now, SSNIT is pensions, and pensions are supposed to have a long-term view.
Sure.
Pension investment should reflect appreciation in assets, because the biggest enemy of pension is inflation. So you must do things that gives you returns higher than inflation to be able to meet your obligations.
Okay.
But if you invest in, let's say, long-term asset, the hotels, as we are being told, then you go ahead subsequently to sell it or give control to somebody else, and you are not getting the returns that you require. You are defeating the purpose for which the fund has been set up. I recall as a young person, SSNIT selling Social Security Bank.
Sure.
I had a working relationship with Social Security Bank at that time, so I understood the bank very well. The bank was very profitable, but it was sold. And I had difficulty understanding that, because if you invested in a long-term asset and then you go ahead and dispose of it, where do you expect to invest to get the returns? Today, somebody else is managing what we used to call the Social Security Bank. It's the one they call SG.
Yeah.
Is SG profitable? Yes, it is.
It is.
So why do we dispose of the profitable assets and start struggling and start looking for other people's money to help us meet our obligation? So those are the fundamental issues. But what I keep saying is, what is hitting us, what is signaling us, is that if we intend to develop pensions, which is what we are doing, we did reform 10 years ago, which we need to look at again. What we need to be doing is to be paying attention to our capital market.
Okay.
The situation where we have, when we contribute money, that is, we take money from people by law, that is contribution to Social Security, and then in turn give it to government in the name of bonds, treasury bills, then do some of these other transactions. It doesn't serve the purpose of pension. We need to develop a capital market which is well regulated, that it enables SSNIT and other pension schemes to invest in capital market, where transactions are done above board. Then everybody could relate to it, and we get a growth we are looking for. The country is looking for long-term investment. The long-term investment channel is the pensions. But if you pay attention clearly with the domestic debt exchange issue that happened, a significant amount of money from the pension schemes were locked up in domestic debt. And we can't develop a country thinking along these lines. As we progress, I will talk about the governance issues, which is also affecting the way the scheme is being managed.
Okay.
Because you have this thing of representation. They take the board of SSNIT. There are about 4 people representing the workers' union.
Yes.
Now, what happened in the boardroom that they could not stop this transaction, but it went beyond them and is in the public domain.
Okay. Now,
should we? Okay.
Yes. Go ahead. Just land.
Should we still be talking about representation, or be talking about people with a required skill set in our boardrooms that can speak truth to power and insist that the right thing is done, that we can have pension scheme that can serve all of us? Remember, it is a social scheme. All of us will get there one day, and we would need the support from a social scheme.
Okay. Now, you've talked about, what SSNIT is all about, what pensions are all about, and you've cited the example of SSB, for instance, Social Security Bank, now SG Bank. Let's look at the example of hotels. You've talked about the bank was making profit, but then had to go. Let's look at the hotels now. You have a lot of, knowledge within this investment industry. What do you make of SSNIT's decision to sell 60% stake in these hotels? Justified?
Look, if I listen to the conversation very well, they talk about efficiency. They talk about control. Very fundamental. You can't sell 60% and still have control. That would be very difficult for you. Now, if really it's money that you are looking for, where would you look for the money? Rather than you yourself, which is a pension fund that every month people are still contributing. You are claiming that you are looking for money from somewhere. Now, what we're saying is, do we have the competencies in SSNIT to manage our assets? That is our contributions. Because if Labadi Beach is under contract and is being managed and is being profitable, probably what SSNIT could do is say, look, guys in Labadi Beach, can we make these other hotels available to you to make it profitable and pay us higher dividend? That is a very simple thing to do. But take it that, okay, truly they needed money to expand, which they don't have. Why wouldn't they look for well-established hotels, people who have that skill set? Say, guys, can you bring money and then help manage this? And structure the arrangement such that if they make money, there's a formula to share. If you don't make money, there's nothing for you. So SSNIT is struggling to come up with the requisite skill sets to be able to manage its own assets. You see, the difficulty of managing these assets is what is reflecting in the actuarial report. And it's not that people are not contributing enough. So I think the approach they are adopting is not the best. And it's not in the interest of the contributors.
Let me just, by way of clarification, let me get what you're trying to say. So you're saying that instead of selling shares, get a management contract where a company with proven track record, as was in the case of Labadi Beach Hotel, comes in to manage these companies. Or you can actually get a company that invests money into it, and based on how much they're able to generate, there's a sharing mechanism instead of wholesale saying, come and buy 60% shares and that's the end of it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because the question is, if they sell 60% and receive that money, what would they use it for? Is it to pay pensioners or to generate another investment? And that investment where? These are landed properties. How many? The land is reducing in Ghana. The locations are not as prime as these very ones. So I don't see how you can sell 60%, raise money, and say you are going to invest it elsewhere. In what? Treasury bills? I think that we need a second look at this whole transaction to make it profitable and beneficial for contributors.
And in having a second look at the transaction, are you suggesting we stop it now and start the process all over again?
We should look at the bigger issue of reforming SSNIT. That's the truth of the matter. The bigger issue. Because people sit in there and make decisions. And if the decisions cannot be right, then we need to look at the bigger issue. The reform is critical so that it can serve the purpose of a social scheme. This transaction wouldn't help pensioners, wouldn't help contributors. These properties, the values would appreciate going to the future. You don't sell something that would appreciate. You don't sell, really, if there's hotel business, why would you sell? If there's a business that you can run and make profit, why would you be eager to sell? So that what? I thought at the end of the day, you are looking for appreciation. Properties do appreciate.
Yeah.
If the hotel is managed properly, you will get the interest or dividend that you are looking for. Why would you be in a hurry to sell? And in any case, you are running a pension scheme. End of month, you are required to pay your pension contribution, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the cash flow is there. So why the rush? What is chasing somebody? Is there a lot more we don't know? Is it that there are difficulties with cash flow? That is why we are selling 60% to raise money to discharge our current liabilities? For me, those are the questions we should be asking. But what is it? What is it that is eating us up that we are in a hurry to sell 60%?
Now, the cash flow questions that you ask, I mean, these are the 60% we're talking about. It's going to be, I mean, it's going to be sold for some $61 million. That's what we are learning. $61 million translates today into some, just about 1 billion Ghana cedis thereabout, less than that even. Now, SSNIT says it pays between 430 to 450 million cedis monthly as this thing to pensioners. The last time they addressed the press, they said they don't have cash flow issues. So if they don't have cash flow issues, why the hurry in selling off these assets?
But that's exactly the question I'm asking. If really, genuinely, they don't have cash flow issues, then they should take their time. They should look for people with skill sets that can help turn those assets into earning assets, make the money, and have funds to pay pensioners.
You've also talked about the bigger picture being the governance structure and even a reform of SSNIT taking into consideration their investments. Tell us more about that.
Again, I said it's a social scheme. Technically, it's called defined benefit. Now, you see that we've done many things to SSNIT. Now, SSNIT is getting 11% of your contribution out of the 18.5.
Yeah.
We've hived off some money to National Health Insurance. So we put SSNIT in a weaker position. The liabilities that SSNIT is supposed to discharge, that is the payment to pensioners, has not changed. So what we need to do is look for competent people, look for brains to sit and manage the inflows that come and the existing assets. Now, the best way you do that is to build a governance structure that helps the scheme to function. What do I mean by this governance structure? Now, you put people who understand the issues in place to manage. Now, you put SSNIT also in a position that you ring-fence the assets, that is the contributions that are coming. You ring-fence it and then prescribe investments that are relevant, that can give you growth. So when you put money in those things, it would appreciate, hopefully above inflation. Then also what we need to do in terms of governance is to say, would we allow SSNIT to touch the contributions to meet a recurrent expenditure? Or we want to say, for instance, let's use returns, a certain percentage of returns on investment as the money that SSNIT can now use to manage its day-to-day activities. We could also push further and say, look, let's develop SSNIT as a collection mechanism. Just use it to collect the contributions. But the investment of what is received, we entrust it into a certain group of people who have the competencies to manage those things and give us the return. And it's in that management, that is how come I'm referring to the development of capital market. If you get it right, you are good. Now, look at the composition of the SSNIT board. Do we still need to get it in that form? Do we still? I wouldn't want to mention any group.
Tell me, do we still need to maintain the form that we have?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Which shouldn't we look at it again? That
how do we look at it again? How do we look at it?
It's quite interesting that when people get into very old age and they are tired, we're asking them to come and do a strenuous job like being on the board of SSNIT. It's a very controversial issue, but we need to interrogate it because you need the energy to sit on a board like SSNIT. You talk about who are the contributors, not in terms of numbers of contributors, but in terms of value. Who are the contributors of the real value? Are they adequately represented? Who are the independent people on the board who can speak truth to power? Who are they? And are they speaking? And are they being listened to? Yes. I'm saying we just need to take a closer look at the board and say, can we recompose it, looking at the act that established the board? I do not believe that this representation system we do is serving us well. Probably we're using the representation system to reward people rather than ask them to serve on board.
I mean, let me just say for purpose of education also. So the law says a chairperson, 2 persons are nominated by the president, one of whom is a woman, 2 representatives of the Ghana Employers Association, 4 representatives of organized labor, 1 representative of the National Pensioners Association, 1 representative of the ministry responsible for finance, not below the rank of a director, 1 representative of security services who is not a member of the Ghana Armed Forces, the Director General of the Trust, and the Company Secretary. Today, if you look at SSNIT, Chairperson Madam Elizabeth Ohene, other members, Dr. Emmanuel Edusa Akwadie, Rep. Ghana Employers Association, Mr. Johnson Anu Amegashi, Rep. Organized Labor, Mr. Joshua Ansan, Rep. Organized Labor, Dr. Evans Jikum, Rep. Organized Labor, Miss Ivy Naso, Rep. Organized Labor, Mr. Benjamin Odote Asumang, Rep. SSNIT Pensioners Association, Peter Osedria, President's nominee, Gloria Irene Amaki Paida, who is President's nominee, Abnose Asari, Rep. Finance Ministry, Kofi Bosumpemo Safomafo, Director General, Gifty Annan, Company Secretary. These are the directors of SSNIT, Board of Directors. But you say we probably may have to take a second look at it. There are 4 members representing organized labor, 2 representing the Employers Association, 1 representing Pensioners Association. If you add these numbers, you get 7. That gives them the majority on the board. So if they're really against the sale of shares, for instance, Dr. Seddoh, they could have raised it instead of waiting and coming out later, isn't it?
Yes, but you need to understand, sorry, you need to understand what happens in the boardroom. If you don't have the energy for the boardroom, you go and everything they say, you support it. You raise your hand to vote in support of it. That is why I'm saying, even as we pick people to serve on boards, let's pick people who have the time and then the capacity to read board documents, do their own research, and be able to make the relevant contribution in the boardroom.
Okay.
Now, if the effectiveness of the board is what we are seeing in this sale and other things we are discussing, now if they are getting it right, it will be a smooth transaction. It won't leak out. But what is leaking out is a reflection that, look, it's not going well in the boardroom. I don't sit in their boardroom, but that will be my deduction. If I represent a certain constituency and I do not support the transaction in the boardroom, I should go back to my constituents and say, this is what happened. So you mobilize support from them. But it's quite strange that we have 4 people representing workers, but they couldn't stop it. Whatever might have happened in the boardroom, they couldn't stop it. It's out there. The people they are representing says, we don't want this transaction. That doesn't speak well of us in terms of governance. I mean, people must stand for values and what they believe in, and in that boardroom even state their position. I have not seen the board minutes. I would love to see it where people, let's say the 4 people from Labour, are saying that, look, we disagreed, but we overruled, we're outvoted. Or somebody says, I won't mind you. Those are the conversations or the interrogation we need to carry out. And that is what should inform us subsequently to pick people who should be on the board of institutions. Listen, we see a certain trend, a phenomenon where we appoint people on board, and these same people are on too many boards, very busy, they have little time to read board documents, they don't make any meaningful contributions in boardrooms. And these are issues we need to engage in. There is nobody who is a super being, has more than 24 hours in a day to be on many boards, very active people being dragged here and there. Why would we do that to ourselves? Even if we're appointing people to board, shouldn't we check whether they have the competencies, whether they have the time, and whether they have the ability to read board papers and ask the critical questions? That is what we should be talking about. And even if we still insist that we should use the representation, we need to find a mechanism where periodically these board members go back to their constituents and discuss what is happening in the organization and get their support going forward.
Dr. Seddoh, thank you very much. But before we go, we wrap it all up, just a bit about the investment of SSNIT. Earlier, you raised questions about it briefly. What is it about the investment? I mean, beyond the fact that we don't have a capital market here, what's it about the investment of SSNIT that is actually impeding the growth of the institution?
Look, we are getting the investments wrong. I've said the enemy of pension is inflation. And I've said pension funds needs to appreciate to serve their purpose. I'll give you one little example. The one making the rounds. Carl Bank. SSNIT is probably about 1/3% shareholder. That is the significant shareholder. Carl Bank is raising the money, 600 million. Yeah. It means SSNIT would have to look for, let's say, 200 million to put in. I'm asking myself, where would they get it from? What happened before Carl Bank became a bank with a negative network position? What happened? Do we have SSNIT representation on the board of Carl Bank? The answer is yes. So what happened in the boardroom? The point I'm making is that if we make the investment, we need to follow it with good people who can ensure that these investments are being managed properly.
Okay.
Yes, that they stand for value, they stand for principles, because the thing belongs to all of us. If we make the wrong decision, look, the person who is being compelled to contribute pension by law, and for which if you don't contribute, you are taken to court, you are sent to prison, that person needs to be protected by the people who are representing them on the various boards. Again, look, it will be good to review SSNIT's investment and make an informed decision about the way forward. I do not believe that it is about ringing that bell and say, come and take it, come and take it. There should be a better way of looking at these things.
Great. Dr. Daniel Seddoh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're very, very grateful to you.
You're welcome.
And that's Dr. Daniel Seddoh, who's an insurance expert. He was formerly the CEO of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. He's an investment analyst himself, sharing his thoughts, talking about the fact that, look, if you have an entity that is making profit, would you want to sell? If you want to, probably expand, Have you considered management contracts, for instance? Have you considered getting people to invest and even having a sharing mechanism? Why would you want to sell your well-performing assets?